then I tried it earlier and didn't do it. So, hi guys, welcome. Thanks for coming. So this is kind of the first step in a potentially sometimes grueling process. So there's multiple steps with financial aid. There are very tiny intricacies and specifications and things that I don't know, and that's why we bring in the guru. There she is. So she's going to talk about all kinds of things post-secondary. If you didn't sign in, Mason, Em, and I signed you in, so you're okay. If I have any parents here or seniors that you didn't put your email address next to your kid's name and you want to do that, so I can include you on any scholarship information or application information, please put that down there and I will make sure to include that. Okay? Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Tiffany DeVan. Thank you very much.
I feel like a celebrity.
There you go. You are a celebrity. You're a local celebrity now. If we can get some scholarships done.
There you go. So good evening, everyone.
Oh,
Thanks for
I
And you are going to
I don't need a microphone.
You good? Okay. Good times out, we're not good. Let me know. I have some
Wait, no,
side
give
issues.
her a mic.
Okay. Yeah. Only reason is because I am recording it to post, so I just am loud.
Does that work yet?
Okay. Now I'm really a celebrity. Microphone and everything.
All right, so good afternoon, good evening, I should say. Again, everybody, I'm Tiffany DeVan. I'm with FIA. And just so you know, I'll always put my contact information here up front. If anyone has any questions regarding anything financial aid related throughout the entire financial aid season, feel free to give me a call, shoot me an email. I'm happy to help you out. A couple things we'll be going over. We'll be going over an overview of financial aid. I tell everyone it's a lot of information in a very short period of time. Don't expect to come out knowing everything. That's what you have the materials for. There's a student aid guide booklet. Make sure you grab that. Pretty much everything you need to know regarding financial aid is included in there. Everything that I'm going to talk about for the most part is also going to be included in there. And it goes into more detail. Also, it's going to provide you with some websites. If you want to dig deeper, that's a nice, easy way to do it without feeling overwhelmed with the presentation. We'll focus on the different types of financial aid, sources of aid. We'll talk about the FAFSA application, how to apply, what happens after you've completed the forms, go over some frequently asked questions. Again, I'm very informal in here if I didn't say that already. So if you have questions, and it's a pretty small group, so if you have questions, feel free to shout them out at any time. No, that's just the name of the time. It's not frozen. The time is on there. Oh, now it is, since you came up here. Maybe we just needed your presence up front. I don't know. Yeah, so it's working again. So, a couple things to talk about when we talk about financial aid. I'd like to start with just the basics of financial aid, letting you know what it is. It's resources or funding that's going to help you cover the cost of an education at a post-secondary school. Now, when I refer to post-secondary, you'll also hear me use the term post-secondary and college interchangeably. I mean anything from a business school, technical school, trade school, community college, four-year school, or beyond. So not just your traditional bricks and mortars college. Lots of different options that a student can choose to continue on their education beyond high school. By show of hands, how many are here for seniors or are seniors? And juniors?
All seniors.
All seniors. So this is easy. Everyday thing, like all the dates that you see that I'm referring to really applies to you, and it's now. So, excuse me, a couple things to remember. Paying is the primary responsibility of both the student and the family to the extent possible. To the extent possible is the key phrase there, because most households are not able to just completely write out a check or send a payment off to their schools to just say, hey, we're going to cover whatever time period it is that the students need. About 8% of the households do require some type of financial aid to assist them with the cost of education. Some things to keep in mind when you are applying for financial aid. Number one, you have to apply. So in addition to looking at the requirements for getting into those schools and the applications or admissions, you want to make sure you're also looking at deadlines and dates regarding financial aid and completing the financial aid paperwork that's required of you. Various eligibility criteria may apply in order to receive and then continue to receive financial aid. And it can vary depending on the type and the source of aid. So it's important to understand the terms and conditions. There are different types of financial aid, and before Before you accept it, you want to make sure you know the terms, you want to make sure you understand the conditions, and you also need to know that upfront, you may not qualify for all forms of financial aid, however, you have to apply in order to be considered. Other things I talked about, for the students, make sure you are playing an active role. For the parents of students who haven't made it in, who are able to come tonight because of other commitments or something like that, make sure that they're playing an active role. What do I mean by that? Engaging. You want to engage your students to find out what careers they're interested in going to, what types of schools are they interested in attending. If they're not quite sure yet and they're still doing research, we have a couple of good websites, and there are more in the book. Educationplanner.org, collegecost.ed.gov are two websites all about college and career planning. Yes, it's in the book. Every website I will mention, everything I mentioned pretty much is listed throughout the booklet. And you also will have access to these slides, so you'll see the websites are also listed on here too. Also tell students take advantage of the college fairs, school visits. Always ask about financial aid at every opportunity you get when you're talking to admissions counselors. Ask them what type of financial aid they offer at their own institutions. The reason I say students play an active role, the more you know and can share with your parents, and parents, the more they can share with you about their goals, you'll be able to figure out the cost of the schools. Because if you don't know what they want to do, you don't know what schools they're interested in doing, how can you really pinpoint that price range? So that's why it's important to know that information up front. And also, this isn't a process that you have to do alone. Ask for assistance if you need it. There are folks like us at VIA, there are folks at each school that you're interested in attending. They have financial aid offices that will help you out throughout this entire process. And we also say, check in with your counselors, because if they don't have the answer, they can connect you to someone who will. These are just websites. The next two are websites that you'll see in the booklet. You'll also see on the slides that will help you through the college and career planning. Collegecost.ed.gov is one that I did mention. That's through the U.S. Department of Education. The other one is through VIA. We have recordings, we have webinars. You want to hear it again virtually. We have some other ones that are just giving it to you in different ways. You want to hear more about scholarships. We have a whole slew of resources. We have toolkits for parents, so always check out that website as well. And so now what I always tell everyone is kind of hold on tight, because it is a lot of information, short period of time. I usually like to start out with some definitions that you will see throughout the entire financial aid process. First one is cost of attendance. Second one is expected family contribution. And your third one is financial aid. So your cost of attendance, every school you're interested in attending will have a cost of attendance throughout their academic year. All seniors will be enrolled for the 2023-2024 academic school year as freshmen. So we're advancing to at least July 1st, 2023. That will be your academic school year, and all schools will have a cost of attendance that starts as early as July 1st, 2023. Start getting familiar with what each school's cost of attendance is. They will not necessarily all be the same, and they can vary depending on the type of school it is. They always will come up with a couple different costs that are out there for you. One is your direct bill. That's usually going to be made up of your tuition and fees, your room and board. Room and board is housing and meal plan. The other costs will be what we call your indirect costs. Not necessarily something you're going to see on the bill, but it can include books and supplies, transportation expenses, some miscellaneous expenses as well. Good thing is that all of these expenses I just mentioned, you can use financial aid to help cover those costs. Expected family contribution, that is another term. For the purposes of financial aid, consider it just a little bit of math. It is a mathematical measure of how much the student and their family are expected to contribute towards the cost of the student's education. It is not necessarily the amount that the student and the family will pay. It's simply just kind of like a baseline that schools will use, that VIA will use, that the federal government can use to determine what you may or may not get in financial aid based on your household's financial strength. They come up with this number based off of the information that you provide on the FAFSA. FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in detail. And then the final term is financial need. That is also another term where I say for financial aid purposes, consider it just a little bit more math. It's simply the difference between your cost of attendance and your expected family contribution. And remember, all schools will have a cost of attendance, so they'll have a specific number for an academic school year. Your expected family contribution is actually spit out to you, not really spit out, but it's provided to you and shown to you at the end of your FAFSA application. It stays the same for that entire academic school year until you complete a new FAFSA the following school year. And then what the schools do is they pull Their cost of attendance, they subtract your expected family contribution. The difference is your financial need if you chose to go to their school. Each school you apply to, you list on your FAFSA application. They'll get the results. You apply to them, they'll tell you what your financial need is at their school. And then based off of that, they'll be able to do some calculations to say, hey, you know what, if you chose our school costs $30,000, your expected family contribution, for example, was $10,000. They'll say your financial need if you chose to go to our school was $20,000, and now we're going to see what type of financial aid you may qualify for at our particular school. So every school will do that calculation. The good thing is that once you do the FAFSA, they'll do their own paperwork and do their own analysis, and it kind of gets a little easier. The schools will let you know what you receive based off of your eligibility, the amount of funding that they have at their schools, as well as the number of students who applied and qualified for that same financial need that you want. Everybody looking so far? Yeah. Yes.
Oh, no, that was a thumbs up.
Oh, okay.
I was just being supported from the back.
Yes, okay, gotcha. So these are the types of aid that you could possibly qualify for. Grants and scholarships, work study, and student loans. You want to look for them in that order. Why? Because grants and scholarships are what we call our free money, also called gift aid. You do not have to pay them back. Grants are usually going to be based off of some type of financial need. In other words, there's going to be a financial need analysis done. What does that mean? The school's going to look at their costs. They're going to subtract your expected family contribution, determine your financial need, let you know if you qualify for the grants or not. So if you don't complete any financial aid paperwork, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to be eligible for a single grant. Scholarships, also free money, but not always based off of financial need. It can be, but it can also be based off of merit, some type of unique characteristic. That's where generally a student can apply for, whether it's academic, athletic, maybe it's one based off of some community service that they may have done. But it's a wide array of criteria that can be met in order to receive a scholarship. Work study is what we call your earned income. The student is actually getting a job, usually coordinated through the school or through the state, and then the money that they earn can go towards the cost of their attendance. So if the student's able to do the work and study balance, it's a nice option that is out there before they head into the final option, which is a student loan, because that is borrowed money that must be repaid, and quite often with interest. So if they're looking for the structured type, again, free money first, it would work. That's a good option. Also, student loans can still be a good viable option, but that is your last resort. Now, some households were able to prepare a little bit differently, and so some additional sources that families use in order to pay. Pennsylvania 529 plans or just 529 plans in general, sometimes they have their own savings or own methods of actually paying the bills. A tuition payment plan is also an option. That is something that some schools offer. And what they will do is, if you had an outstanding balance, here's the cost. They subtract out the financial aid or scholarships you would have received. Anything that's left over, they'll say, hey, well, we have a program where you can actually break out the remaining balance in installments and then just pay it off. It's usually interest rate, doesn't really cost you much, but depending on how much you owe, it can be pretty pricey because you have to get the first semester paid in full before you enter your second semester. So depending on what you owe, it could be pricey, but it's always something that you can look to look into school. Again, look for the free money first. And I don't go into a great deal about scholarships, I just give you a couple of reminders, because I think your counselors can kind of guide you through this piece as well. But some things, again, I always send to the students as reminders. Don't forget to look for the free money first. I also put this slide up here because usually when I'm talking to students, they say, I have no idea what to look for. Scholarships, can't find them. And they'll say, I just don't have the time. So I say, okay, here's a couple tips to make it a little bit easier. Number one up on the slide is a whole slew of websites that are out there to get you started. So you got some scholarship sites to go to. And the other thing I always say, there are 24 hours in a day, 7 days in a week. You pick a few hours each week. You pick the hour of the day, you pick the day of the week, and start tackling those scholarships that are out there. You never want to leave what I say money on the table. Please start your search early, you search often, and you do not stop until you've completed your post-secondary schooling. So if you're planning to go to school for 4 years, don't stop until you've gotten that 4-year degree. If it's a 2-year program or a certificate program, don't stop until you've completed it. Again, like I said, eligibility criteria varies. It doesn't matter if you're not the most athletically inclined, academically inclined, or you think you might not qualify. Look over the qualifications. If you do, make sure that you apply. Create up front what we call an academic resume. It's kind of like a 1 or 2 sheeter in the electronic form. That's going to highlight those key things that most scholarship organizations ask for. Most of them will tell you to tell us about maybe your extracurricular activities? Did you hold any leadership roles? And this is from your 9th and 12th grade year. If you already have this kind of like put into play, they may also ask about your GPA or your SAT scores and things like that. Most commonly asked questions, if you're not sure, pull up a scholarship application, see what they're offering, put it on there. A lot of times they'll say, did you do any community service? If so, with whom and how many hours? Have that on your 1 or 2 sheeter as well. And then you'll have it, and it's already set. You just continue to tweak it and update it as needed. But when you're plowing away with scholarships, it's almost a copy and paste. You don't always have to start to think from scratch to try and get through those scholarship applications. Also create one standard essay and tweak it from time to time. Sometimes students say, I avoid essay questions. Why? It's free money. Don't leave any money on the table. Start out, get you a good standard scholarship essay. Put some personality into it if they allow, but make sure you're reading what the question is asking of you, follow through, and you get it done. Secure your letter of recommendations early. A lot of scholarship organizations will say that they need someone to write a letter of recommendation. Start thinking about who it can be. Ask them if they will write it. Ask them how much advance notice they need as well, because you don't want to spring it on at the very last minute. And then even share your academic resume with them, because it makes it a little easier. If there's something about you or an accomplishment that you had, and maybe they forgot about it or didn't know, they might be able to speak on it in your letter. Most importantly, pay attention to the deadlines. Again, understand the terms and conditions. And what I tell students a lot of times, if you're not paying attention to those deadlines and you qualify, some scholarship organizations don't care how much time you put into it, they would just shred it, and that's it. You don't want to, again, leave money on the table, especially when you probably were going to be that person who received a scholarship. Some other things when we're talking free aid, a couple of different sources of aid that are out there. Federal government and state government are, state meaning FIA, we're some of the two largest issuers of financial aid. Federal government, the Federal Department of Education, is actually your largest source of funding. They issue grants, they issue student loans, they're also the issuer of federal work study programs. Federal student loan program is one where there's like a direct student loan and one in the parent's name, and then your graduate students can also apply, and you have the information about them listed, and I'll talk a little bit more about them a little later. State government, that's VIA. We are the issuer of the Pennsylvania State Grant application, as well as some special state aid programs that are out there. We also have a private student loan called the PA Pool Private Loan. Those schools you're interested in attending, they have funding. So those institutions you're looking at, again, that's why I said always tap into them and ask them what type of funding do they have, what their due dates look like. A lot of times you have alumni, maybe they have set up an endowment fund, maybe they set up their own scholarships, so check in with them. And then those scholarship sources, again, private, public, civic organizations, they offer scholarships if you're interested in private scholarships. In addition to what VIA offers, look into those private funding sources as well. This next slide is just to give you a snapshot of some of the programs that are offered through the Federal Student Aid Program. You don't have to worry about remembering all of those. This information and more is listed on our Student Aid Guide on page 25. It gives you a bigger description of all of them, as well as if you go to studentaid.gov, which is the federal government's website, it gives you that information as well. I do point out that the Pell Grant is the largest grant that is out there. It is simply based off of the expected family contribution. If a student or family qualifies for this, when you complete your FAFSA application, you'll actually see it on the last page, whether or not you qualify. That is the only one that doesn't really consider the cost of attendance. So it doesn't matter which school you go to, if you qualify for the Pell, that's the amount that you pay. Excuse me. You have to be an undergraduate student, which all of your students will be. You have to reapply every single year for the FAFSA, but you have to submit a FAFSA in order to be considered. So if you don't, they won't consider you. The good thing is, all of these grants that are out there, the first three are grants. If you'll complete the FAFSA application, the schools and with the federal government will automatically check to see if you qualify for them. And you can read further in your own leisure what each of those additional ones are. Direct funding, again, we'll talk about those more in detail. Pennsylvania State Grant. So we have a Pennsylvania State Grant and some special state aid programs. For the Pennsylvania State Grant, additional funding can be had. In order to be considered, you have to complete not just the FAFSA, but there's a Pennsylvania State Grant form in addition to. You only completed the very first year, the state grant application, the very first time you're applying, because we're going to automatically receive the results of your FAFSA anyway, and then every year thereafter, we'll just look at your FAFSA application to determine if you qualify. You have to be a Pennsylvania resident, attending a Pennsylvania school to be considered for up to the maximum amount. You still have to have financial need, and they also base it in part on the cost of the school. So there's a little chart down there where you can see the higher the cost of the school, the greater the award amount you could possibly qualify for. Maximum award amount can change every year based on what the budget is. So for this upcoming year, for this current year, it's $57.50. That's the maximum award for a full-time student who's attending a Pennsylvania school. Students who are going half-time could earn up to half that amount. If you plan to go to school in a different state, though, looks a little bit different. So if you're planning to go to school in Delaware, Massachusetts, Ohio, Vermont, West Virginia, or Washington, D.C., the most you could get is $600. Far cry from $57.50. Keep that in mind, but don't allow that to stop you. The reason I say that is you might forego $57.50, possibly up to $57.50, if you go to school in another state. But you're going to go through the full financial aid process first. Complete every application that is accessible to you. Continue to look for scholarships, in which you go in a state grant, you might end up picking up elsewhere in another form of financial aid. So don't cross any school off of your list on what you think you might lose, because you haven't yet figured out what you could get. Students going to school in any other state than those states I mentioned will not get a dime from you. So again, still don't cross any school off the list. Now, veterans, if you're a veteran, you're going to school, you can get up to $800 for those different schools. You have to be in an approved program of study of at least 2 years. You also have to be attending an approved Pennsylvania State school, not Pennsylvania school, via approved school, in order to be considered for the Pennsylvania State grant. Now, our Pennsylvania State Administered programs, we have quite a few of them. I don't go into detail about each of those, but what I do say is that depending on your circumstance, there may be additional funding, free funding, that you can qualify for based on your specific circumstance. Always go to our website. Page 21 of our student aid guide actually starts to explain some of those programs. One I point out in particular, our PA Partnerships for Access to Higher Education. That's a PATH program. Our PATH program is where we partner with outside foundations and scholarship organizations who are offering funds to your students. So if your students, if you all apply to their scholarships and you receive them, we will do a dollar-for-dollar match of that scholarship for up to $3,500. So if a foundation awards you a $3,000 scholarship, they're one of our PATH partners, we're going to double it, and it's now turned into a $6,000 scholarship. Nice way to do half the work, get twice the award. All of our PATH partners are listed on our website, so that's something to look into. Another program I talk about is our Targeted Industry Program. That's pretty much the same thing, almost, that you would get for, as a Pennsylvania State grant. However, for the Pennsylvania State grant, you have to be enrolled for 2 years. PA TIP program, you have to be in a program of study between 10 weeks to less than 2 years. It's either going to go up to the maximum approved for the state grant or the maximum cost for your program of study. You still have to complete the FAFSA, and then there's a separate PA TIP application that you complete the first year as opposed to the Pennsylvania State grant. And again, that application is also on our website. Everybody still with me? All right, so now we're going to talk about the form. You know the financial aid is out there. How do you apply? Primary application that you will complete, the most important application you're going to complete, is the FAFSA application. It's going to collect key information about the student. A dependent student is going to collect information about your family, your household, and it's going to help everyone to see if you qualify for federal programs, from the Federal Department of Education, state programs, as well as those school programs. You can file it online, which is the preferred method. There technically is a PDF that is available at studentaid.gov. Don't recommend you use it. It's a difference between getting your results processed within hours to a few days to several weeks. There's also skip logic, ability to edit and minimize mistakes and help you skip over questions that do not apply to you. And I think it's pretty fast. I think it's pretty secure. Also available in both English and Spanish. We don't need to worry about the Federal Student Estimator, but that's if you're not yet ready to complete the FAFSA, you can use the estimator to kind of get a feel for what your numbers could look like. That's good for a junior or sophomore family or something like that. You guys are pretty much ready to complete the FAFSA and can complete it very, very soon. In addition, when you're looking at your schools, not all schools require the same forms. All schools pretty much will tell you to complete the FAFSA application in order to be considered for aid. But you want to make sure you're checking with each of those schools to find out which ones they specifically require. So if you're looking at 4 schools, check into each one of those 4 schools. Financial aid offices is where you go to or go to their website. Again, it's required by, the FAFSA is required by us, by scholarship organizations, by the Department of Education in your schools. You can go to studentaid.gov or FAFSA.gov. It's the the same site, but FAFSA.gov takes you to the landing site to actually start the application. Studentaid.gov is going to give you just a whole lot of information about financial aid in general. Pennsylvania State Grant Form, again, if you want to be considered for state aid, you have to complete that first year. Good thing is that it's on the confirmation page or the last page of the FAFSA application. There's a link you can link to and just answer a few additional questions, and it will allow you to complete both forms in one setting. Otherwise, you can go to our website, PA.org, and then do the same thing, usually about 7 to 10 days after you completed the FAFSA. Some schools will tell you there's a CSS profile that they want you to complete, or the college scholarship service profile. Some tell you they have their own institutional financial aid forms. If they require it, then complete them. If they do not, don't worry about it. Those are usually going to be required by those schools who have their own additional funding, and they want to use more information than what's found in the FAFSA application to determine who's going to get it. CSS profile is administered through the same website you go to register for your SATs, College Board, and you can get all the information and videos and things like that on your, from them, or you can talk directly with the school's financial aid offices who are requiring you to complete it. So the Pennsylvania State Grant application, again, something else about this one. This is the last form. I give you a little bit more detail. If you miss that link at the end of the FAFSA, the confirmation page on the FAFSA website, on the FAFSA form, you can't get back to that link to then click. But you can go to VIA's website. If you do, we'll tell you to create a username, you can create a password directly for VIA, and it gets you through. VIA also will ask you some additional questions. They're going to ask about your program of study, are you full-time or part-time? We'll ask you about the value of the Pennsylvania 529 plan. If you are required to list it on the FAFSA, then you enter it on your VIA. FAFSA requires some families to say, hey, we care about your assets, so they require you to list them. If it's a Pennsylvania 529 plan, we don't care about it, so we tell you to take it out of the equation. That's the reason why they ask, but it will guide you through every single question when you get to it. Next thing is to remember your deadlines. Deadlines are key, not just for the applications that you're applying for to get into admissions, not just for those scholarships, but the FAFSA and all other sorts of funding that the schools may tell you to have. There are specific deadlines that are down there, and instead of focusing on those dates, I'll tell you two pieces of information. How about the earliest of deadlines? So every school you're interested in, figure out what their priority filing deadline is. Some schools will tell you they don't have some, and other schools will. And if they have a priority filing deadline, that means they want you to complete your FAFSA and any other required form completed before their deadline. If you don't, and they have additional funding or institutional aid, things like that, you won't be considered a priority. Now, if you miss the deadline, do you still fill it out? Absolutely. But they usually don't leave the free money sitting on the table. So again, that's why I say don't miss those deadlines. Schools always have the earliest deadlines. Federal government, for the FAFSA, FAFSA is a federal form, so they will say you technically have until the end of the academic year in which you will be enrolled as a freshman. So I'm saying because it's all seniors in here, I can say freshman. So you'll be freshman, your end of your academic year will be ending June 2024. So technically, FAFSA says you have until then to complete it. But the state, in order to be considered for the state grant, will tell you you have really until the end of your senior year in high school or right before the summer ends. So it's either going to be May 1st or August 1st, depending on the type of school you want to go to. Again, don't focus on that because most schools will have a deadline way before that. So if you waited to the state grant's deadline or the federal government's deadline, guess what? You missed a lot of your school's deadline. So that's why I say do your research first. I also say it's nice to have a firm deadline for yourselves. You can knock it out by the end of Thanksgiving break. You're usually in good hands with everything. So before December 1st, and there are schools who have deadlines December 1st. So there could be some who have them earlier. I haven't seen anyone prior to December 1st, but key takeaway, knock out that FAFSA if you can before December 1st. In addition to that, the FAFSA itself, any and every student who wants to be considered has to complete the FAFSA. They're going to complete it every single school year, so it's not just a one-time thing. There's always going to be 2 live FAFSAs out there. You all are going to be looking for the 23-24 FAFSA application. That version does not become available to you until October 1st, 2022. So if you go out down there now and you try to start it, you're starting last year's version, and you're going to have to come back and then do this year's version. You're also going to answer every question that they ask based on the day you're answering the form. So you're completing the form. So if it says, what's the balance of your checking or savings, that's the day you're completing the form, with the exception of your income information. When it gets to the income section, they're going to be specific. So for seniors, you're going to use your 2021 income information this year. Each year, it will advance it by one. Everybody still with me? Any questions so far? All right. Yes.
Okay, all the tasks, can we apply now as some before the new year, even we are not choose the college yet?
Yes, you can. So you do not have to have applied or been accepted to the school in order to complete the FAFSA, but you can't complete it until October 1st. So not now meaning September, no, but October 1st, yep.
After October, we can apply even we are not know what the college we are going.
Yep, if you're just considering it, go ahead and list it.
And then you can always go back in and add other schools as well. So if you're not sure and you decide on another school after you've submitted the FAFSA, you can go back in and add those schools or take schools out. Like you can make modifications to that as you need.
So key things you'll need, and there's a FAFSA tip sheet that was included in your handouts that also guides you through this information. You may need your social security number, alien registration ID numbers if you're eligible non-citizen, income information, and tax returns as well for 2021, if you're going to be specific. They may ask for the balance of your checking or savings. They may ask for investment information. Email addresses. Students will list an email address that you will check. Parents do the same thing because if they want to communicate with you, they meaning the Department of Education, the schools, or VIA, they're going to send you an email, and they're not going to continue processing your forms until you respond if there's an outstanding question. Student and one parent has to at least complete, at least one parent has to complete an FSA ID or federal student aid account if you want to electronically sign your forms. And again, the names of the schools that you're interested in attending. There's 7 different sections on the FAFSA application. I'm not going to talk about all of them, but I'll give you some tips to get through a couple of those key sections. One thing I want you to remember are just some of the tools that are out there. There is a question mark. You can see that arrow. It's a tiny little question mark besides every single question on the FAFSA. And if you click on it, it opens up a box and it tells you specifically what they're looking for in that particular question. So if you're on the section where they're talking about assets and you're not even sure what an asset is, click the question mark. It's going to open up a window. It's going to tell you everything about an asset, whether it's reportable, whether it's not reportable, what you consider it, how you figure it out. It gives you all that good stuff. If you have a question, just simply on the name where it says you enter your name, okay, so enter your name as it appears with the Social Security Administration, meaning your legal name, no name. So it guides you through every single thing, but a lot of times families don't know that question mark is there, so they freeze out. There's also, on the FAFSA application, there's always a section, it's usually up at the top, it says Help Center. If you click on the Help Center, drops down, gives you information that will allow you to chat with someone. It allows you to email with someone. It allows you to call them. Chatting is usually the most efficient way, especially when they're busy in October, but they can actually see exactly what you're doing and communicate with you directly then. Those are just some tools just to kind of get you through if you kind of get a little nervous, because it can be overwhelming. Another thing to remember about the FAFSA application, if you're doing it online, you can start the FAFSA, save your information, and come back to it within 45 days, and it won't start all over. So that's another thing. If it gets a little heavy for you, take a break. Come back. Or call us. We'll help you through it as well. A couple key things to remember. And you guys pretty much, with your question and your response, pretty much answered this. Only the schools listed on the FAFSA will receive the results. So, lots of privacy laws out there. You don't list those schools, they don't get the information. But you don't have to have applied or been accepted. You can list up to 10 schools in one setting. If you're still looking at more than 10 schools, you technically can add more. You just have to, I usually say let it run, and then come back, pull a few schools off, and then add more. It only physically holds the space for 10 schools, but all the schools will still receive your information. And the other thing is you can go back and continue to add on more schools at a later date. VIA only sees the final school you chose, so once you make your final decision, really before you graduate, let us know what it is. That way, we'll know what costs to associate with your state grant if you qualify. Now, for those students who actually are completing the FAFSA and they're not quite sure if they're a dependent student or who their parent is when they're completing the FAFSA, it gets a little crazy, even though day to day we think that's just a normal question. Well, who's your parent? Well, FAFSA thinks of it a little bit differently. So, because it's the student's form, student's information is always required. The legal parent is the parent whose information, legal parent's information is what goes on the FAFSA form. But which legal parent? So biological parents living in the same household with the student, whether they're married to one another or not, their information goes on the FAFSA form. That also includes an adoptive parent because you are the legal parent. In the case where the parents are divorced or separated, it is the parent with whom the student lived with the most for the past 12 months. If that happens to be a tie, then it's the parent that provided the most financial support over the past 12 months. In the case where the custodial parent is remarried and the student lives with them, then it's the student, the custodial parent, and the step parent's information. The parent that does not live in that household, their information is not going to be required. Changes are coming for future FAFSA stuff, but for right now, that's what you need to remember. No one else's information goes on there. Grandma, grandpa, aunt, uncle, does not matter who it is. Foster parents, legal guardians, their information will never be asked for. And I repeat that 20 times, and it's still, sometimes people get home and they second guess themselves. The good thing is that's what will guide you if you just answer the questions. And it will say parents' information is required, parents' information is not required. But that's what it's telling you, your parent is only your legal parent, only those ones that I just kind of like referenced and went through. What ends up happening is that the student is in a different situation. They're either going to say, well, we still need your parents' information, or you can file on your own. So students who can file on their own. First four bullet points don't really matter in high school. If you're 24, married, a veteran, and working on a graduate level degree, doesn't generally happen when I'm talking to high school students. But if you're an emancipated minor under legal guardianship, if you're an orphan in foster care, or have been awarded the court at any time since the age of 13, have legal dependents of your own and provide at least 51% of their support, or if you've been deemed homeless by the proper authority. Those students will answer those questions, and there are specific questions that the FAFSA will go through to kind of figure this out. If you're going to answer yes to those, they'll tell you that you're considered an independent student. Your parents' information is not going to be required, so only your information. So that means if you have a legal guardian, not someone in custody, but legal guardian, they don't want their information. They just want your information as a student. The other thing for FIA, we're always going to ask for more information. We're not going to just accept FAFSA's response. We'll say, okay, that may be the case, but prove it. Give us some documentation. So there usually has to be some type of court-ordered documentation to substantiate those claims. If you have a situation that you think is cloudy, you don't come to me, you don't come to your counselors, the best thing for you to do is to reach directly out to the financial aid officers at the schools you're interested in attending, and you ask them what your options should be, because they have some leeway with certain situations. Now, if you say, hey, we just don't get along, they're going to say, no, we still want your parents' information. But if there's a true special circumstance, they can let you know how it has to happen. You also will call FIA State Grant Department and explain it to them, and they will tell you exactly how it goes. So don't just rely and say, hey, well, my neighbor did it this way, our situations are similar. Rely on the schools. If you apply to 4 schools, call the financial aid office at all 4 schools, because once we know whose information goes on there, they're always going to tell you we want the financial information. So if the student had income for 2021, they want to know about it. If the parents did, they want to know about it, you report it. Some households, depending on their income and some other factors, they're going to tell you, you know what, we want to know about asset information. And then some families will qualify for what they call a simplified version of the FAFSA or the EFC, and they don't want to know about your assets. Just they're going to stop really at your income. Now, in order to determine this, there's really a question. It'll say, do you have assets or do your parents have assets that exceed? And it's going to be a unique number directly to the person who's completing that FAFSA application. So if there is a number that's, let's say it's $10,000, do your parents have assets that exceed $10,000? The answer is no. They'll ask you, do you want to skip the asset questions? Absolutely. You skip them and you're ready to sign. If the answer is yes, they do have assets that exceed that, then they're going to ask additional questions. What's never considered an asset though, so in that $10,000, and I'm using $10,000 as just an example, the home you live in, primary home, qualified retirement accounts, life insurance policies, they don't care about those. Value of a small business that employs less than 100 full-time employees, they don't care about that. They don't care about the value of it. They don't care about the value of a family farm if you live on a family farm. Military benefits, your basic military benefits, they're not considered assets either for the purposes of FAFSA. That doesn't mean that you can't consider them assets, but they're not considered assets for FAFSA. Most popular assets, stocks, bonds, 529 funds, those things. Now, if they tell you you can skip the assets, they're not listing the value of anything. And again, if you're unsure, that question mark is a great place that's going to open up a window and give you a little bit more information. Another thing, if you were required to complete a tax return, and you did, there's a tool that you can use called the IRS data retrieval tool that will pull your information directly into the FAFSA application. Makes it much easier than actually going step by step. Now, let's just say that you can't use the data retrieval tool, or you didn't actually complete a tax return. You can estimate your 2021 income, or maybe you had other types of income, but it wasn't from tax return. There's a manual process that you can use to actually enter it, and that's what will guide you. It'll tell you to go to whatever source of income you had, go to this line, enter the information here, and it still walks you through that particular process. Not everyone then can use the FAFSA application. So depending on your marital status is different on your FAFSA application than what it was when you did your taxes. It's not going to let you use it. Another reason could be if your information was compromised for identity theft. And you have a flag out there, it's not going to pull your information. FAFSA is going to go through an authentication process, authenticate who you are. She's also going to ask you to list your address that you used when you did your tax return for 2021. If those things can't match up, you're going to have to enter it manually, but again, that's okay. There's a manual process for that. Once you've done that, you're pretty much entered data. And again, this is a process that everybody is about to embark on, and you can start it as early as October 1st. I always tell everyone, if you get a chance, there's also a stock card that you'll see called a federal student aid account. It's like I think this year it's green and some other things on it. Gives you step-by-step instructions on how to complete a federal student aid account. And talking with some of you prior to this, I do know some parents already have a federal student aid account. Whether you have one for yourself or for another child, you don't have to create another one. That follows you through. It's your own. But you need to create one, at least one parent in a two-parent household. The student has to create one so that you can electronically sign the FAFSA. It also acts as a signature, electronic signature on the state grant application as well. On the state grant application, we'll accept the signature from FAFSA, but you must acknowledge our rights and responsibilities before you take out any, before you receive any state funding. If the signature page is unavailable, if the FAFSA ID is unavailable, there's a signature page that you can print at the very end and mail in. Keep in mind, if you do that, FAFSA is not considered received until it gets processed through. And again, you're going through the mail, or snail mail, as I like to call it. Good thing is that you get that far, you're pretty much ready to sign and submit. So you sign it, it tells you to sign, and then once you sign, don't get off, submit the actual FAFSA application. So again, the student signs, one parent and two-parent household signs. Don't stop till it says congratulations with the student's name. It tells you successfully completed the FAFSA application. It's also going to tell you how you can actually get to that link. It gives you a thing that says you want to complete your state grant application, click this link, it takes you over to FIA. It also tells you about that Pell Grant. Remember, if you qualify for the Pell Grant, you'll see that there. It's going to tell you that you qualify for a federal student loan because all students do as long as you completed the FAFSA. So you'll see that there as well. It gives you information about those schools. You're still on the fence. Look at what the graduation rate is, transfer rate, retention rate, and it gives you some links that you can go to if you want to continue to research those schools you've been interested in. Something it doesn't do. It doesn't talk about, there's not a section to talk about, hey, my income doesn't look like it looked anymore. It's now at the end of 22, and it was 2021's information. Life happens to the best of us, whether it's death, disability, reduced income, maybe some financial hardships over the last couple of years due to COVID. Like I said, life happens to the best of us, but FAFSA doesn't capture that. So you have to reach out directly to the school's financial aid offices. Each one that you list on the FAFSA, you have to give them that. Otherwise, they're going to look at the information that you submitted. And then once you do that, you're going to ask them to take this information into consideration when they're trying to determine your report. It's never a guarantee, but it doesn't hurt. Many schools will actually take it into consideration. And your financial aid package could look a little bit different once they know about your special circumstance. You also do the same thing for FIA, with state aid. Again, we usually almost always ask for some type of documentation to substantiate your claims, but it's worth it if you had a unique circumstance. Everybody still with me? All right, forms are filed. So let's assume that forms are filed. What happens? Student's going to get what we call a student aid report. It's going to be like a listing of everything you listed on the FAFSA application. It's your chance to actually review it to make sure what you entered is accurate, because that's the information that's going to be submitted to those schools that you listed on the application. Once the schools get it, they're going to start to process some things. That's when we, in the beginning, remember I said there's the cost of attendance minus the expected family contribution equals your financial need. That's when they're going to start to plug in those numbers to determine what you might or might not get at your school. So that's like that need analysis that's going to be done. This is also the point where I tell students to monitor your emails, follow up on them. Parents encourage the students to do the same thing, because if there was something that popped back from the Department of Ed or from a school and you have questions and you don't check it, it's kind of just going to linger until you do. So if you haven't heard from a school, always double check your emails. Now for those who want to know what that EFC is made of, that's for those who have a lot of questions. And it's really just pulling out key information. Looks at the parents' income and assets if the students are dependent. Looks at the students' income and assets. And it doesn't expect that every single every asset you've had or every dime that you've had to be calculated towards your expected family contribution. There are formulas that are in there. They realize that everybody, you get grown and you acquire assets and you plan for retirement and some other things. So every dime doesn't go towards it. It's actually between like 6 and 12% is what they look at from an asset standpoint for parents. For students, they look at about 20%. There's an income protection allowance for students that'll say you're allowed to work up to a certain dollar amount, and none of that is expected to be counted towards your expected family contribution. For students, for this upcoming year, $7,600. So anything that they earn, $7,600 less, nobody cares. Anything in excess of that, they look at 50% up. And again, you don't have to remember these calculations. Some people just want to know the nuts and bolts of how this is done, and so I usually kind of give that information. They also look at the size of the family, number of family members in college, and it does an analysis and kind of gives the school a good starting point to determine what you may qualify for in financial aid. But after that is done, okay, you have a question?
So, I'll be filling one of mine out for my daughter, but I was in college part-time at that time. Is that getting all that stuff? Is that what that means?
So, when they say family members in college, they don't mean the parent.
That's a good question.
I tried.
Yes, we tried. Yes, we tried.
Sorry, buddy.
Yeah, sorry, buddy. So they don't mean that, but yeah, 2 kids in school. So they ask how
So,
many.
right around the time this one gets done, then the other.
Then, just back 0 here, right?
A little quicker.
Back 0. But that was a good question. So did everybody hear a question? Does it take into consideration, like if the parent is in school, does it count? No. And in actuality, that's one of the factors that they're thinking about taking away anyway, so, in the future. But, I didn't want to put a date, I shouldn't have said that, put a date for it.
It's not a
But what happens is, everything gets processed, schools are going to send out what they call those financial aid notification letters, but they generally only send it to the student who, number 1, listed them on the FAFSA, number 2, has now applied to the school and then been accepted. So once they accept it, they can go out, grab your information, and knock it out. But just because, and that's one of the reasons that it doesn't matter if you applied or not, because they only pull your information once they realize that, hey, he or she really wants to go to my school. And at that point, you can kind of start doing your research, determine what your true costs look like, select your final school. You're going to get some notices that come in. They come in every shape, size, and form. There's not one standard format, but generally a school will tell you what their costs are. They will also tell you the types and sources of financial aid that you may be receiving. So that's where you'll look to see, okay, hey, I see a grant, I see possibly a student loan, I may see work study. You'll see the different types of aid and who it's coming from. Also, it's going to tell you your rights and responsibilities. Read it again. If you've not read it once, read it twice. Explains what must be done to accept or reject the financial aid. So again, make sure you follow up with the schools. If there's anything on these notifications that are not clear, you reach out to the school that sends you the information, and they will explain it to you. If you think you received free funding, but you're not sure, maybe it's a loan, then call them. Because sometimes it could look a little cloudy. Bottom line, when you're looking at everyone's information, you should know what your out-of-pocket expenses are. You'll look at your costs, you'll look at what you receive. If there's anything left over, and quite often there is, then you look at that. Also, not just list these, because when you're comparing, especially if you're looking at more than one school, just to give yourself some things to consider. How much of this award or aid is free money? How much of it is not free money? How much are based on need, based on merit? Are there things that you need to do in order to keep this aid? Do you have to reapply every single year? So these are just some questions for you all, and again, you'll have the slides to look at, to ponder. Come up with your own questions if it's cloudy, that you can ask them if it's not clear as well. What I do tell everyone is once you know what you're working with and you've really made your final choice in schools, make sure you have the funding that you need in order to go to your top school of choice. We already know there's the cost of attendance, tuition fees, room and board, books and supplies, transportation expenses. However, just because the school's cost of attendance is a certain dollar amount, look at what each one is. That's not necessarily what they're billing you, and you might be able to tweak it and say, hey, you know what? We're going to commute, so my transportation expenses won't necessarily be as big, but maybe you have some out-of-pocket expenses that might take it a little higher. And maybe you also want to consider this beyond 1 year. What's it look like, not just the first year, but additional years? You have other children's educational expenses to consider. Are you in school yourself? Do you have your own expenses to consider? Are you willing to commit to a student loan? So again, more questions just for yourselves to think about, not to kind of overwhelm you, but you want to make sure that when you start the process, you're not all of a sudden caught off guard by some unexpected expenses. For the students, have you made an affordable choice of school? It's not necessarily, to me, in my opinion, it's not the name of the school that you're going for. You want to enter a school where you can actually go into the career that you want to go into. So you want to get the education that is needed in order to get into the career you need so that you can live the lifestyle that you want to live. You don't want to break the bank. So many different goals to get to that end, so many different paths to get to that end goal. So keep that in mind. Have a discussion about what is affordable. And then at the end of the day, for the students and the parents, start thinking about if there is a gap left over, because quite often there can be. What do you do? This is again why I remind students about those scholarships, because scholarships quite often can bridge that gap between that cost that is out there and the financial aid that you may or may not have received. Financial aid doesn't generally cover everyone's expenses. Scholarships can help, and they don't really care, schools don't really care how you get it. Just get it if you want to go to the school. So it could be a savings, it could be 529 plans, it can be additional financial aid that you end up qualifying for. Ends up being student loans a lot of times. So again, that's why I still stress, look for those scholarships all year round. But if you have to borrow wisely, we have a great tool called My Smart Borrowing. It's a website, and I can tell everyone if you've never borrowed, or even if you have, it's a nice interactive tool that allows you to plug in some key information about you as a student and do a comparison with schools to just help you figure out if you're trying to overborrow or you're right on target if you need to borrow. Because what it does is it looks up the cost of your starting salary, if you know what you want to do. It also looks at the cost of the schools, factors in some savings, and then says, hey, you would need to borrow this dollar amount for this particular schools. You can compare up to 4 at a time. And it says based off of what your expected starting salary is going to be, if you're overborrowing, or you're right on target. You're in a good place. This is something I also tell students revisit every single year if you did take out student loans. So if you took out student loans the first year, revisit that the second year, because sometimes borrowing every single year can get away from you because you don't have to repay immediately. So make sure that you can kind of keep up with it. Again, some things to keep in mind, exhaust all free forms of financial aid first. Grant, scholarships, work study, and then your student loans. Seek your federal student loans before the private. They have far more flexible repayment options, and they're easier to get. Only borrow the amount that is needed because student loan debt has to be repaid, but do your research, like I said. Here's another good thing about this. We go into great detail about the student loans and that student aid guide. Some things to keep in mind, a federal direct loan and a federal plus loan are through the U.S. Department of Education. The student has to complete the FAFSA application to be considered. Even if the student says, the only thing I'm going to get is a student loan, I'm going to apply for the student loan, they still have to complete the FAFSA. And hopefully the student's not going to just go for the student loan first, and hopefully the student, if there's a student contemplating that, you didn't hear anything else, look for the free money first. But if you have to, then you're done. A federal direct loan is a loan in the student's name only. They don't do a credit check, hopes and dreams are all you need, and to complete that FAFSA. Because you're paying it back. So they will let you borrow some money. Based on financial need, it's either going to be what we call a subsidized portion and an unsubsidized portion. Subsidized means a portion of that loan. For the portion of that loan, the government pays the interest while you're in school and then up to 6 months after you leave school. Unsubsidized, interest is accruing and you're responsible for it at all times. Good thing is that you can postpone those payments until 6 months after you leave school. Keep in mind, even if you don't complete your program, you're still going to pay back those student loans. So again, borrow wisely, only what you need. Those are the most key important pieces to that. The other thing, completing the FAFSA doesn't mean you apply for the student loan. There is a separate application called a master promissory note that you have to complete. They go through an entrance counseling just to make sure, again, the student is aware of their rights and responsibilities. Plus loan is in the parent's name only. Their borrowing power is far greater than the student's. What I didn't give you was the student's award amounts. They're listed in the student aid guide that's there. The student who's a freshman can get up to $5,500 an academic school year, so it's limited, and it slightly increases every single year up to an aggregate amount of $31,000 as an undergraduate student. Independent students can get a little bit more. If the student's parent applied for a plus loan and was denied, they can also get a little bit more. But for the plus loan, it's in the parent's name only. The student has no financial responsibility to this. It's also not transferred into the student's name once the student graduates or leaves school. If the parent says, hey, this is an okay option, they do have to go through a pretty lenient credit check. They can borrow up to the cost of attendance minus any other financial aid received. So their borrowing power goes a lot farther. Doesn't mean that you want to borrow that much. Still encourage kids to look for scholarships. Rates are always set July 1st of every year for first-time borrowers. Private loans are a little bit different. Those terms and conditions can vary based on the lender. So one lender can say, hey, we'll lend to students, we'll lend to parents, we'll lend to someone else. It doesn't even matter as long as they're a creditworthy borrower, they can borrow on behalf of the student. Just depends on the lender. Plus loan has to be borrowed by the parent of the student. Direct student loan has to be taken out by the student. I always say, if you have your own financial institution you're into, that you have, and you're considering a private loan over the federal loans, totally your option. You can figure out what's best for you. But see if they offer a reduced rate because you are a member, because sometimes they do. Sometimes you get the best deal with your own financial institution. VIA also offers one. It's pretty affordable. It's up to you if you want to look at it. It skipped right over that page. Maybe it wasn't meant for me to talk about it, but what it is it is a private loan. It is offered through VIA. They don't have fees to it. But again, don't choose that first. You still look for your free money first. You still do your own comparisons between a plus loan, between private loans, because you never know which one is going to be the best fit for you. Everybody with me on that stuff? All right, so what can you do now? So if you're not done visiting your schools, check out collegecost.ed.gov, because again, that's one of those that's a website that has a big umbrella with all these different things. You can compare schools, you can compare costs. Every school has what we call a net price calculator on it. They're required to have one. If you're considering more than one school, figure out what your net cost will be. What that does is it takes the cost of attendance of the school, subtracts out the free money. Once you've done that, that's what you're truly paying. That's your true net cost. So figure that out. So the school could have a really great looking deal that says you don't have to pay a dime to come to our school, but it's caked up with student loans. When another school says, hey, you don't have to pay a dime and it's all free money, it's not really the same thing. And so make sure you're doing your research up front. We don't have to worry about the estimator because again, you guys are able to start this October 1st. Have that conversation, what is affordable. Don't stop looking for the scholarships until you've completed the process. Complete the FAFSA as early as October 1st, but complete the FSAIDs early. I usually say give yourself, so sometime next week, complete an FSAID, you get it, keep it in a safe, secure place. That way it just goes through. It's a lot easier to kind of like slide through the process. Few additional FAFSA tips. Remember, 23-24 application, there will be 2 live. It's always going to be the one on the left-hand side, and it doesn't become available until October 1st. IRS data retrieval tool is the best option if you can use it, and it's going to pull 2021 tax information that's out there. List of schools that you're interested in attending. Doesn't matter if you've applied or been accepted, and you can always go back and add more schools later. Complete the Pennsylvania State Grant, even if you're not really considering a state grant. If you're not considering a state school, because you might change your mind. And once it's in there, it's in, you've met the deadline. If you change your mind, like September 1st, and they're like, wow, I'm going to the state school, maybe I can go back and apply for FIA. You can't that year. You've missed the deadline. It's pretty tough with that. So you'd have to do it late the next year. So again, you've left money on the table. You don't want to do that. FSAID, like I said, one student for the student and one parent. Keep it. For the parents who already have one, it's yours. You don't have to then reapply for a new FSAID every single year. So I did give you all a lot of information. Told you it's a lot of information, short period of time. Keep in mind, there's a student aid guide that is available to you all. My contact information is available in the beginning. The slides will be made available to you.
I'm going to send them out.
It's being recorded, so you'll have a recording to also go back and reference as well.